My name is Grace, and at 58 years old, I thought I knew my family inside out. As a retired elementary school teacher from Boston, I dedicated my life to my husband Richard and our only son Thomas. When Thomas married Stephanie 3 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms despite a few small tensions. This Christmas was supposed to be special, filled with our family traditions. Then I texted Stephanie asking about our plans. Her reply changed everything. "Oops, we forgot to tell you we went to Spain. Just me, your son, and your husband. Only the ones who really matter, you know. If you're watching this, let me know where you're from and hit that like and subscribe button to hear how I turned this family betrayal into my greatest strength." Richard and I built our life together over 35 years of marriage. We met in college, married young, and struggled through those early years while completing our education. When Thomas was born 2 years later, our family felt complete. I put my teaching career on hold for a while, wanting to give our son the best possible start in life. Christmas was always sacred in our household. Richard would bring home the biggest tree he could find, and I would spend days baking gingerbread cookies from my grandmother's recipe. Thomas would help hang ornaments, each with its own special story. We created a tradition of opening one gift on Christmas Eve, always in matching pajamas that I carefully selected each year. Christmas morning always began with my special cinnamon rolls before we opened the rest of our gifts. As Thomas grew up, our traditions evolved, but the core remained the same: family first, always together on Christmas. Even when Thomas went to college across the country, he always flew home for the holidays. It was non-negotiable in our family. Thomas met Stephanie during his graduate studies in business. He called me one evening, his voice vibrating with excitement as he described this brilliant marketing student who had captivated him. Their romance was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, Thomas brought her home to meet us. My first impression of Stephanie was of a polished, ambitious young woman. She had graduated top of her class and already had job offers from prestigious marketing firms. Her appearance was always impeccable: designer clothes, perfect makeup, not a hair out of place. She was beautiful, intelligent, and charming. Richard was immediately impressed by her business acumen. But there were moments when I caught glimpses of something else. When Thomas was out of earshot, she would sometimes dismiss my opinions or make subtle comments about the simplicity of our home. I chalked it up to nervousness and different backgrounds. She came from wealth, while we had built our life through hard work and careful saving. When Thomas announced their engagement after just 10 months of dating, I had reservations but kept them to myself. The wedding was elaborate and expensive, with Stephanie's parents covering most costs. I spent weeks making handcrafted favors for the guests, which Stephanie replaced with expensive custom gifts at the last minute. I swallowed my hurt and focused on welcoming her properly into our family. After retiring 2 years ago, Richard and I invested a significant portion of our savings into renovating our home. We added a guest suite specifically designed with Thomas and Stephanie in mind, hoping they would visit more often. We updated the kitchen to accommodate large family gatherings, dreaming of grandchildren someday filling the space with laughter. The first Christmas after Thomas and Stephanie married, they came to stay with us, but arrived late on Christmas Eve and left early on December 26th. Stephanie spent much of the visit on her phone, citing work emergencies. The second Christmas, they insisted we visit them in their new home. I brought all the ingredients to make our traditional foods, but Stephanie had arranged catering without telling me. Again, I adapted, not wanting to create tension. This year, I was determined to make Christmas special. I had been planning since August, purchasing thoughtful gifts for everyone, including a vintage brooch for Stephanie that had belonged to my mother. I spent weeks decorating every corner of our home, using the ornaments that held decades of memories. I had already prepared cookie dough to bake with Stephanie, hoping to finally share some bonding time. The day I sent the text message was December 22nd. I had just finished wrapping the last of the presents and wanted to confirm when they would arrive so I could have Thomas's favorite meal ready. I sent a cheerful message asking about their arrival time and whether they had any special requests for Christmas dinner. Then I waited, humming Christmas carols as I tidied up the wrapping paper. The notification sound from my phone made me smile. I expected to see details about their arrival time, maybe a request for Thomas's favorite apple pie. Instead, the words on the screen felt like a physical blow. "Oops, we forgot to tell you we went to Spain. Just me, your son, and your husband. Only the ones who really matter, We'll be back after New Year's. Don't wait up." I stared at those words, reading them over and over, each time hoping they would somehow rearrange themselves into something less cruel. My fingers trembled as I typed a response. "Is this some kind of joke?" The 3 dots appeared immediately. "No joke, Richard didn't tell you. He planned it all as a surprise for me and Thomas. Said you wouldn't mind having some alone time. We're having the best time in Barcelona. The food is amazing and the weather is perfect. So much better than boring old Boston Christmas." I called Thomas immediately. His phone went straight to voicemail. I tried Richard next with the same result. My heart pounding, I walked to our bedroom, opened Richard's closet, and found his suitcase missing. His travel toiletry bag was gone too. I hadn't even noticed. He must have packed while I was grocery shopping the day before. In our home office, I found evidence of planning. A printed flight confirmation accidentally left behind had slipped between the desk and the wall. The booking was from 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks during which Richard had sat across from me at breakfast discussing Christmas plans as if nothing was different. I remembered Richard mentioning a work conference in January, asking casual questions about whether I would mind if he was gone for a few days after the holidays. He must have been testing the waters, seeing if I would suspect anything when he eventually disappeared for Spain. Thomas had called twice in the past week, conversations now revealed as opportunities to check that I remained ignorant of their plans. I spent hours sitting in my perfectly decorated living room, surrounded by wrapped presents and festive decorations that suddenly seemed like props in a cruel play where I was the only one who didn't know the script. The Christmas tree lights blinked rhythmically, illuminating the ornaments that represented 35 years of what I now questioned was a life built on lies. The doorbell rang around 6 that evening. It was our neighbors, the Johnsons, dropping off their annual Christmas cookies. I somehow managed to smile to accept their gift, to make small talk about holiday plans. No, Thomas and Stephanie weren't arriving until later. Yes, Richard was just out running errands. The lies fell from my lips easily, my pride unwilling to reveal the humiliation I felt. After they left, I sat in the dark, the only light coming from the Christmas tree. I scrolled through my phone, looking at last year's Christmas photos. There was Richard with his arm around me, Thomas and Stephanie beside us. Everyone smiling. Was that all pretend too? That night I slept on the couch, unable to face our empty bed. It was the first time in decades I had been alone in our house during Christmas week. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the house settling and the ticking of the grandfather clock Richard had inherited from his father. Each tick seemed to taunt me alone, alone, alone. Christmas Eve arrived with a fresh snowfall that blanketed Boston in pristine white. In previous years, Richard and I would have taken a morning walk together, admiring the decorated homes in our neighborhood. Thomas would have been sleeping in while I prepared dough for cinnamon rolls to bake Christmas morning. Instead, I sat alone at the kitchen table, still trying to reach my family. I had sent multiple texts to both Richard and Thomas. Richard hadn't responded at all. Thomas sent a brief message. "Sorry, Mom, reception is spotty here. Talk when we get back." I opened Instagram, something I rarely did, and immediately wished I hadn't. Stephanie had posted photos. There was my husband, my son, and my daughter-in-law posing in front of Sagrada Familia. Richard was wearing the scarf I had given him last Christmas. The caption read, "Best Christmas ever, with the only family that matters. #blessed, #family first." The comments section was filled with friends congratulating them on the wonderful trip. Someone asked about me. Stephanie replied, "Mother-in-law needed some alone time this year. You know how it is with the older generation. They can't keep up with our adventures." My phone rang. It was my sister Laura calling from Chicago. "Merry Christmas Eve, sis. Just checking in before the chaos of tomorrow. How are you all doing?" I broke down, telling her everything through sobs that made my words almost incomprehensible. Laura was silent for a long moment after I finished. "I'm coming over," she said finally. "I can be on the first flight tomorrow." "No," I protested weakly. "Don't ruin your Christmas with your kids and grandkids. I'll be fine." After some argument, I convinced her to stay home, promising to call again tomorrow. I didn't tell her how relieved I was. The thought of anyone seeing me in this state of humiliation was unbearable. Throughout the day, calls and texts arrived from friends and distant family members. I responded to each with carefully crafted lies about Richard having a mild cold, so we were keeping Christmas quiet this year. Thomas and Stephanie were spending the holiday with her family, I said. Each lie built upon the last until I had created an alternate reality where everything was fine. Several friends invited me to join their celebrations when they heard Richard was under the weather. I declined each invitation, unable to maintain the facade in person for hours. That evening, I forced myself to prepare a small Christmas dinner. I had bought a turkey breast, potatoes, and vegetables for 4 people. I cooked it all, setting the table for 1. The absurdity struck me as I positioned the centerpiece perfectly between empty chairs. Who was I performing for the ghosts of Christmas past? As I ate my solitary meal, I found myself reviewing my 35-year marriage. Had Richard always been capable of such cruelty, or was this Stephanie's influence? Had I been blind to signs of his discontent, I thought of the small irritations in recent years, his impatience with my chatting with neighbors, his dismissal of my desire to visit my sister more often, his increasing secretiveness about finances, despite our lifelong practice of transparency. After dinner, I pulled out old photo albums. There we were on our honeymoon, young and glowing with love. Thomas as a baby, Richard proudly holding him. Family vacations, school events, anniversaries. Decades of what I had believed was a happy life. Had it all been a lie? Or had something changed? Christmas morning dawned gray and cold. I made coffee but skipped the traditional cinnamon rolls. What was the point? The gifts I had wrapped for my family sat under the tree, accusingly bright in their festive paper. On impulse, I opened my gift to Richard. A vintage watch I had found at an antique shop months ago, similar to one his grandfather had owned, the one he had often mentioned wishing he had inherited. The tears finally came, then not the shocked tears of the previous days, but deep body-racking sobs that left me curled on the floor beside the Christmas tree. This was rock bottom, surrounded by physical reminders of the family who had deemed me unworthy of even basic respect. As evening approached, my phone rang. It was Thomas. I almost didn't answer, but some maternal instinct made me pick up. "Mom, Merry Christmas," he said, his voice overly bright. "Is it?" I responded flatly. There was an awkward pause. "Look, Mom, I know you're upset. We should have told you earlier about the trip. It was last minute and—" "Last minute," I interrupted. "I found the booking from 3 weeks ago, Thomas." Another pause. I could hear Stephanie's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out her words. Stephanie thought it would be good for Dad to have a special vacation. You know he works so hard, and you're always so busy with your book clubs and volunteer work. We thought you wouldn't mind some time to yourself. The explanation was so transparent, so obviously scripted by Stephanie, that it momentarily left me speechless. Your father and I have spent 35 Christmases together, Thomas. Not once have we ever been apart. Did that not seem strange to you, to be taking my husband across the world without even telling me? Mom, you're overreacting. It's just a vacation. We'll do Christmas when we get back. In the background, I could hear Stephanie more clearly now. Tell her we'll bring her a souvenir that will make her happy. That's when I knew. This call wasn't about apologizing. It was about managing me, minimizing the situation, making me the unreasonable one so they could enjoy the rest of their trip, unburdened by guilt. "Goodbye, Thomas," I said quietly, and hung up before he could respond. The day after Christmas, I began to see things more clearly. Moving methodically through the house, I started to notice patterns I had previously overlooked. In Richard's office, I found bank statements he had hidden in a folder labeled Home Warranty Documents, a file I would never normally have reason to access. The statements showed large withdrawals from our joint retirement account over the past 2 years, money I had assumed was going toward our home renovations. Instead, the withdrawals aligned with dates of Stephanie's business expansion. She had launched her own marketing firm a year after marrying Thomas, and Richard had apparently been funding it without my knowledge. In Richard's desk drawer, I found his old phone, the one he had claimed broke when he upgraded 3 months ago. Curiosity made me charge it. To my surprise, it still worked, and he hadn't logged out of his messages. There were dozens between him and Stephanie going back more than a year. The messages weren't romantic. That would have been almost easier to understand. Instead, they showed a conspiracy of financial entanglement and manipulation. Richard had been advising Stephanie on business decisions, investing in her company, without consulting me, and worst of all, complaining about me to her. "Grace doesn't understand business opportunities," one message read. "It's easier not to tell her about the investment. She'd just worry unnecessarily." Another from Stephanie. "Thomas still wants to spend Christmas with his mommy. Can you help convince him Barcelona would be better? I can't stand another holiday eating her dry turkey and pretending to care about those tacky ornaments." Richard's response, "Leave it to me. Grace will understand. She always does." With shaking hands, I called Anthony Thomas's best friend since childhood. Anthony had always been like a second son to me, staying close even after Thomas moved away for college. "Has Thomas seemed different to you lately?" I asked after exchanging pleasantries. Anthony hesitated. "Mrs. Wilson, I've wanted to say something for a while. Thomas has changed since he married Stephanie. He's dropped most of his old friends, and when we do see him, she controls the conversation. Several of us have tried to talk to him about it, but he just gets defensive." "What about Richard? Have you noticed anything there?" Another pause. "To be honest, I was surprised how quickly Mr. Wilson took to Stephanie. They seem to form their own little club. Thomas even joked once that his dad and wife get along better than he does with either of them sometimes." After hanging up, I sat processing this information when the doorbell rang. It was Laura, my sister, standing on the porch with a small suitcase. "I know you said not to come, but I couldn't leave you alone," she said, pulling me into a hug. With Laura beside me, I found the courage to call Richard directly. He answered on the fourth ring, the sound of laughter and music in the background. "Grace, now isn't a good time," he said immediately. "I found the bank statements, Richard, and your old phone with the messages between you and Stephanie." The background noise suddenly diminished. He must have moved to somewhere quieter. "You had no right to go through my private things," he said, his voice cold. "Private things like our joint retirement account that you've been draining to fund Stephanie's business. It's an investment, Grace, something you've never understood. Stephanie's company is going to be huge, and we'll make back 10 times what I put in. There is no we in decisions you make behind my back. Look, I was going to tell you when the time was right. Stephanie needed seed money, and the opportunity was too good to pass up. And Christmas in Spain. When were you going to tell me about that? While you were at the airport?" His sigh was heavy with exasperation. "Stephanie wanted to experience a European Christmas. Thomas was excited about it. I knew you'd make a fuss about traditions and family time. So you just left, without a word? You're always so emotional about holidays. It was easier this way." In that moment, I realized Richard hadn't been manipulated by Stephanie. They were cut from the same cloth, both willing to discard people who didn't serve their purposes. After hanging up, Laura helped me make more calls. We contacted my bank and discovered that Richard had changed the mailing address for our statements months ago. The bank representative expressed concern about the pattern of withdrawals and transfers to an LLC that matched Stephanie's company name. I called Thomas's childhood friend Michael, now a financial advisor. Without revealing all the details, I asked for an emergency consultation. Michael connected me with his colleague Jessica, who specialized in financial abuse cases. She confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. I had been strategically isolated and financially exploited by my own husband with my daughter-in-law as either accomplice or instigator. Through a chain of conversations with friends and family, I learned that this wasn't Stephanie's first venture into family manipulation. Her former boyfriend's mother reached out after hearing rumors about our situation. She shared a disturbing similar pattern. Stephanie had convinced her son to invest heavily in her first business attempt, draining his savings, before abruptly ending the relationship when the business failed. As the new year approached, I transformed from victim to strategist. With Laura by my side for emotional support, I met with a financial advisor recommended by Jessica. The news was grim, but not catastrophic. Richard had withdrawn approximately $180,000 from our retirement funds, about 30% of our total savings. The advisor helped me document every unauthorized transaction, creating a clear paper trail of financial misconduct. She then referred me to Susan Williams, one of Boston's top divorce attorneys who specialized in cases involving financial deception. "What your husband has done constitutes financial abuse," Susan explained during our first meeting. The good news is that it's provable. The transfers to his daughter-in-law's business without your consent from joint accounts gives us a strong case. Meanwhile, Laura introduced me to her friend James, who worked as a banking investigator. James reviewed the financial evidence and identified several potential legal violations in how the money had been transferred and reported. These kinds of transactions leave fingerprints, James explained. The way they've structured the transfers to avoid detection could actually constitute fraud. And the fact that your signature was forged on at least 2 of the documents gives us additional leverage. With James's help, I filed formal complaints with the financial institutions involved. We documented everything meticulously, building a case that would be difficult to dispute. While the financial investigation proceeded, I focused on protecting what remained. I changed the locks on the house, legally justified as I was the sole owner, having inherited it from my parents. I moved valuable jewelry and important documents to a safety deposit box only I could access. I opened new accounts at different banks, transferring my personal savings and my portion of the remaining joint funds based on my lawyer's guidance about what would be legally appropriate. The emotional toll was overwhelming. I arranged sessions with Dr. Patterson, a therapist specializing in betrayal trauma. She helped me process the complex emotions of being deceived by the people closest to me. What you're feeling, the shock, the disbelief, the questioning of your entire relationship, these are all normal responses to abnormal behavior, she assured me. The fact that you're taking constructive action rather than just collapsing is a sign of your resilience. During one particularly difficult session, I confessed my desire for revenge. I want them to feel what I felt, I admitted. That moment of realizing you've been completely blindsided by people you trusted. Dr. Patterson didn't judge. Instead, she helped me channel those feelings into constructive planning. The best response isn't acting out of anger, but ensuring justice and your future security. As January progressed, I decided not to confront Richard and Thomas immediately upon their return. Susan advised me to wait until we had completed our financial investigation. James suggested that letting them believe they'd gotten away with their scheme might lead them to make additional mistakes we could document. Together with Susan, James, and my support network, we developed a strategic response. The plan centered around the most powerful evidence we had, the documented financial fraud. James worked with his contacts at the bank to prepare a formal notification about the questionable transactions that would be sent directly to all parties involved, including Stephanie as the recipient of the misappropriated funds. The timing would be crucial. We wanted the notification to arrive at a moment when maximum accountability was possible. We scheduled it for 2 days after their return from Spain, enough time for them to settle back in, but before they could develop any new narratives or excuses. Sometimes the simplest approach is the most effective, Susan advised. Let the official record speak for itself. A bank notification about potential fraud carries weight that your accusations might not. As the day of their return approached, I felt a strange calm. I had moved temporarily to Laura's house, leaving no indication of where I had gone. My phone would be turned off. I would be unreachable at the moment they expected to find me waiting, ready to accept their half-hearted apologies and souvenir gifts. Instead, they would return to an empty house, and soon after a formal notification that would shatter their illusion of clever manipulation. Richard, Thomas, and Stephanie returned from Spain on January 4th. From Laura's house, I watched their social media updates change from vacation photos to confused messages about not being able to reach me. Richard called Laura, who answered with Oscar-worthy concern. "Grace isn't with you." "How strange. She told me you all were spending Christmas together. I've been on a cruise with limited reception. Is everything okay?" That evening, Richard discovered he couldn't access our main joint account. The bank had frozen it pending the investigation. His calls to me went straight to voicemail. My absence was the first indication that their plan had not succeeded as expected. On January 6th, exactly as planned, the formal bank notification was delivered simultaneously to our home address, to Stephanie's business email, and to Thomas's personal email. The notification detailed potential fraudulent activity, including unauthorized transfers, possible forgery, and misappropriation of retirement funds. It requested all parties to appear for formal interviews regarding the transactions. I wasn't physically present to witness their reactions, but Thomas called Laura in a panic less than an hour after the notifications were sent. "Aunt Laura, have you heard from Mom? There's some kind of mistake with the bank. They're saying Dad transferred money to Stephanie's company illegally. We need to find Mom right away to clear this up." Laura played her role perfectly. "That sounds serious, Thomas. What does your father say about it?" He's not making sense right now. Something about investment opportunities and verbal agreements. Stephanie's upset because they're implying she did something wrong. Can you please help us find Mom?" "I'll tell you what," Laura said. "Why don't you all come over to my place this evening? I'll try to reach Grace in the meantime." That evening, Richard, Thomas, and Stephanie arrived at Laura's house, expecting to find me already there, or at least to get information about my whereabouts. Instead, they found me sitting calmly at the dining table with James from the bank and my attorney, Susan. The look on their faces was exactly what I had imagined in my darkest moments, shock giving way to the dawning realization that they had severely miscalculated. "Grace," Richard started, his voice taking on the patronizing tone I now recognized all too well. "There's been a misunderstanding with the bank. If you had just answered your phone—" "There's no misunderstanding," I interrupted, my voice steady. "Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss." For the next hour, James methodically presented the evidence of financial misconduct. Bank statements showing transfers from our retirement accounts to Stephanie's business LLC, documents with forged signatures, tax implications of the improperly withdrawn retirement funds. Susan then outlined the legal consequences, potential civil penalties, impact on the divorce proceedings I was initiating, and possible criminal charges, depending on how they chose to proceed. Throughout the presentation, Richard's face cycled through emotions: indignation, then worry, then fear. Stephanie maintained a cold, calculated expression until it became clear how thoroughly we had documented everything. Thomas looked increasingly horrified as he realized the extent of the deception. "Did you know about this?" Thomas finally asked his father, his voice breaking. "Did you really forge Mom's signature to give Stephanie money from your retirement?" Richard's composure cracked. "It was an investment. Grace never understood business. Stephanie's company is going to be worth millions, and we needed to get in on the ground floor. I was going to pay it all back." "With what?" I asked quietly. "The retirement account was our security for the future, money we spent decades building together." "Thomas knew about the investments, too," Stephanie interjected suddenly. "He signed off on everything. Don't try to play innocent now." The look of betrayal on Thomas's face confirmed what I had suspected. He had been manipulated, too, perhaps not knowing the full extent of the financial arrangements between his wife and his father. "Is that true, Dad?" Thomas asked. Richard couldn't meet his son's eyes. "You knew we were helping Stephanie's business. Maybe not all the details, but you knew." "I thought you were giving advice and maybe some small investments. I didn't know you were draining Mom's retirement fund and forging signatures." As the reality of their situation became clear, Stephanie's mask finally dropped completely. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "So Richard made some investments without telling you. Marriages have separate interests all the time. You're overreacting because you're jealous that Richard sees my potential, that we left you behind for Christmas because, frankly, your traditions are suffocating." The room went silent. Even Richard looked shocked at her candor. In that moment of naked truth, I calmly reached into my bag and removed the divorce papers Susan had prepared. I slid them across the table to Richard. "I'll be staying with Laura until you've moved out," I said quietly. "You have 30 days as outlined in the papers. The court has been notified about the financial situation, and any further attempts to access our joint assets will be considered in violation of the temporary order included with these documents." Richard stared at the papers, the reality of consequences finally sinking in. "Grace, we can work this out," he stammered. 35 years of marriage, you can't just throw that away." "I didn't," I replied. "You did. When you decided I didn't matter enough to even tell me you were leaving for Christmas." As they left Laura's house that evening, the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. Richard walked out stooped and defeated. Stephanie stormed ahead, already on her phone, likely calling her attorney. Thomas lingered at the door, torn between following his wife and staying to apologize more thoroughly. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Not everything." "But you knew enough, Thomas. You knew I was alone on Christmas while you were in Spain. That was your choice." He had no response to that truth. As he walked away, I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak and liberation. The family I had built my life around had crumbled, but in its place was emerging something I had neglected for too long, my own sense of worth and dignity. 6 months after that fateful Christmas text, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. The divorce was finalized more quickly than anticipated, largely due to the overwhelming evidence of financial misconduct. Richard did not contest the division of assets once his attempts to minimize his actions failed in court. I used part of the settlement to purchase a small beachside apartment in a neighboring coastal town. The sound of waves became my daily soundtrack, washing away old pain with each tide. The space was entirely mine, decorated to my taste, without compromise. No more accommodating Richard's preference for minimalism or Stephanie's criticisms of my cluttered style. The financial settlement secured my future. With Susan's help, I recovered most of the funds Richard had diverted, plus additional compensation for the emotional distress and breach of fiduciary duty. James provided expert testimony that proved crucial in the financial aspects of the case. His knowledge of banking regulations and fraud detection left no room for Richard's attorney to maneuver. That first Easter after everything happened, I hosted a small gathering at my new home. Laura and her family came along with several friends who had supported me throughout the ordeal. We created new traditions unburdened by the ghosts of past betrayals. The laughter that filled my apartment that day felt genuine in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Thomas had been attempting reconciliation since February. At first, I maintained distance, needing time to process my feelings about his role in everything. He had left Stephanie in March, finally recognizing the pattern of manipulation that had damaged so many of his relationships. Our healing began slowly with short phone calls that gradually evolved into monthly lunch meetings. During one such lunch in May, Thomas confessed the full extent of Stephanie's influence. "She always made Dad seem like this business genius who believed in her when no one else did," he explained. "She would tell me how you didn't understand modern relationships, how holiday traditions were just ways for older generations to control the younger ones. I bought into it because it made me feel sophisticated breaking away from tradition." "And your father encouraged this?" I asked. Looking back, he and Stephanie had this strange alliance. They would have private conversations about business opportunities, investments. When I questioned anything, they made me feel like I was being provincial and unsophisticated, just like they said you were. Richard had made several attempts to reconcile as well. He sent letters expressing regret flowers on my birthday, and even came to the apartment unannounced once. I maintained firm boundaries, returning the flowers and speaking to him only through my attorney. Perhaps someday we might have some form of cordial relationship, but the trust was irreparably broken. One unexpected development was my growing passion for financial literacy. The experience had shown me how vulnerable many people, particularly women of my generation, could be to financial abuse. I started a support group for individuals who had experienced similar situations, meeting twice monthly at the local library. This evolved into volunteer work with a nonprofit organization focused on financial literacy for elderly individuals. I found purpose in helping others recognize the warning signs I had missed teaching them to protect themselves from those who might exploit their trust. An unexpected friendship blossomed with James, the banking investigator. What began as professional consultations during the case evolved into occasional coffee meetings to discuss financial education initiatives. James was widowed 3 years earlier and understood the process of rebuilding a life after loss. Our friendship remained just that, a friendship, but it introduced the possibility that my heart might someday be open to new connections. As the next Christmas approached, I faced the prospect of holiday celebrations with mixed emotions. Laura invited me to join her family in Chicago, but I decided to host my own small gathering instead. I invited friends who, for various reasons, found themselves without family during the holidays. We created new traditions focusing on connection rather than obligation. Thomas asked if he could visit on Christmas Eve. I agreed, setting clear expectations that it would be a short visit as part of my new boundaries. When he arrived, he brought a small, thoughtfully chosen gift, rather than the expensive but impersonal presents Stephanie had always selected. "I've been thinking about what you taught me growing up," he said as we shared coffee. "About how presents aren't about the price tag, but the thought behind them. How traditions matter because they connect us to our history and to each other." It was a small acknowledgement, but meaningful. The journey of redefining our relationship would be long, but it had begun. The most profound change was within myself. I no longer defined my worth through my roles as wife and mother. I recognized the strength that had always existed within me, previously channeled into supporting others, but now directed toward my own growth and happiness. Dr. Patterson helped me see that the greatest act of self-respect was not the divorce or the financial settlement, but my refusal to let bitterness define my future. "Forgiveness doesn't mean allowing people back into positions where they can hurt you again," she explained. "It means freeing yourself from being controlled by what they did." I received a Christmas card from Thomas a week before the holiday. For the first time in years, it was just from him. No mention of Stephanie, no dual signature. Inside was a handwritten note. "Mom, I'm learning what real family means. Thank you for never giving up on teaching me even when I wasn't listening. I hope one day to be worthy of the love you've always given so freely." It wasn't a perfect ending. Life rarely provides those. But it was a new beginning built on hard-won wisdom and self-respect. What I learned through this journey was that family isn't defined by blood or legal ties, but by respect, honesty, and mutual care. That traditions matter not because they're unchangeable, but because they represent continuity and connection in a world where both are increasingly rare. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to rediscover your own worth and to build boundaries that protect it. The text message that was meant to exclude and diminish me became the catalyst for the most profound growth of my life. Sometimes the greatest gift is the painful truth that sets us free from illusions. In losing the family I thought I had, I found the strength and community I truly needed. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to positive change in your life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation through adversity. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful new beginnings come from painful endings. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the courage to value yourself in all your relationships.